Hi, I'm Kelly and welcome to Kapowski Reads. Spring is springing. There's blooms everywhere. It feels like spring is here, and in the interest of spring, I wanted to give my TBR a little bit of a spring clean. Basically, in this video, I am planning to finish books that I am currently partway through. What a beautiful goal. I am currently partway through 2 books, so that's what we're polishing off this week. And these are both TBR veterans. I've had them on my shelf for a little while and I've been reading them for differing amounts of time. So first book is 8 Detectives by Alex Pavesi. This is on my spring TBR, so I definitely want to finish it. I'm already partway through it. This has, just threw the other book there so I can use both hands. This book has the funnest cover where there's these little holes. It was the Waterstones crime fiction, I believe, of the month. Who knows when? And then you open it and there's little icons. So very fun. This is a murder mystery. It is about an author who has left the country. He's gone off to basically live away from people, start a new life. And he's approached by a publicist who wants to republish his short story collections. And each chapter switches between being the story of Grant, the author, and Julia, the publisher agent, and a short story that Grant has written. Grant basically applied mathematics to the murder mystery genre, and each story is a different sort of way of describing his theory. I'm a decent way through the book so far, and I am enjoying it. There has been one short story I hated, but that is a pet peeve of mine where, this is probably a bit of a spoiler, but I won't tell you which story it is, so maybe it's not. I don't enjoy a short story where there's a bully character at all. I don't like when there's sort of a crooked cop. I don't like when there's a detective who is, planting things. I don't like when people don't follow in a murder mystery, you have to follow. There are set rules and expectations that I, as a reader, have. And if you don't do them, I'm going to get annoyed. So there's only been one story I did not enjoy, but the rest of them have left me going, I would read a full novel of that, which I think is probably the best way of going into this book, to sort of gauge each short story, if you will, separately, and then try and get a gauge on the real life story between Grant and Julia. I would say that I'm preferring the short stories that Grant has written, the fictional short stories in the fictional book, very meta. I'm liking them more than I'm liking the real story. But I feel that the real story is not quite started. Even though I'm halfway through, I feel there's a decent amount of time left, that something's going to happen. There's going to be more than I have seen so far. And I'm just waiting for that to happen. But I'm having a good time and I want to keep reading it, which is kind of all you can really ask for. The next book that I am determined to finish is another. Well, I say another, that's not a short story collection, but it kind of is. This definitely is. The Yellow Wallpaper and Selected Writings by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. I have been reading this book, I will be completely honest with you, because there is absolutely no point in me lying to you. What is that going to achieve? I have been reading this book since February of 2025. So over a year, and it's not because I'm not enjoying it. It's just because it's a short story collection. I can dip in and out, but I tend to have a book that I'm reading at bedtime, and if I don't, I pick this up. But it just so happens that I've had other books, and unfortunately this collection has just kind of been ignored. And that wasn't my intention, but it Those were my actions. I don't know. I think that the yellow wallpaper is incredibly popular. I don't know if it's not, but I think it is. So maybe I'm over explaining this. This is a short story collection that begins with the yellow wallpaper, which in my experience with this author is their most famous work, or at least it's the work that I know them best for. I have read the yellow wallpaper before. It was a story I really enjoyed as a teenager. I read it a few times. It was probably, I was never a big fan of short stories, but if I was to pick a favourite short story, I probably would have included the yellow wallpaper. It's very creepy, and I really like books that sort of look into somewhat sort of like maybe irrational fears that they are irrational, but you can rationalise them in your head. That's a little bit niche, but that's something I very much enjoy. This collection is, I suppose, at its heart, a collection of short stories that look towards feminism and womanhood, motherhood, being a wife, things like that. But it does need to be acknowledged that these stories they're not contemporary. They were written between like late 19th century, early to mid 20th century. So they're not as relatable as some stories could be, but there are some things that have not changed that much. I am enjoying them, and I just feel kind of silly for not coming back to the book, for letting it just be ignored. But the book's not angry at me. I'm angry at me, but I'm just going to read the book and hopefully enjoy it. I don't have a lot of things planned for this week. I'm gonna go get some fresh air, just really feel almost stifled, and it's nice to go out. Other than that, my only plans are to relax, read my books. I don't know. That's it. We'll find out together. I am back from a very productive morning. I went out for a walk. Lovely. And then I went to the Zoology Museum. For anybody who doesn't know the ins and outs of Aberdeen, because maybe why would you? There's a Zoology Museum. I've never been to it, but I've always wanted to go. The opening hours and my free time never aligned until today. I'd actually planned to just walk through the zoology building to go to the university gardens, but I saw a sign saying the museum was open and it felt like fate. So I am a lover of any kind of museum, especially a natural history museum, and I think a zoology museum is probably the closest thing that we have here. It's just two massive rooms full of things that are related to zoology. Lots of like taxidermy, lots of skeletons, lots of information. It was fascinating and had a great time. And I definitely want to go back again. And I realised that me saying we have a zoology museum might sound strange. There's a zoology university, or there's part of Aberdeen University is devoted to zoology. So there's a building which is the zoology building, which, fun fact, featured in the film Tetris. So I've not seen the film, but there's a building that is very grey, very angular. That is the zoology building. That is in Aberdeen. And it's a teaching university. So the museum is for people who are studying, but is also open to the public at certain times of the year. And I went, it was so fascinating. I had a great time. And then I went and I finished my book in a cafe where I had a really nice toastie. And it's really sunny, so I've got a bit of a headache. So much has happened. I finished my book and I've also freed up this bookmark. My neighbour gave me like 5 of these bookmarks in a little set as a thank you for looking after her cat while she was away. I would look after him for free. He is in my house like 8 hours a day. But I don't feed him. She was away and I had to feed him. So I have these, but I've lost like 3 of them. So very happy to get it back. I finished this and I really liked it. I think, and this sounds so strange, but I think this is a universal experience, maybe. I think that I have read this book at the wrong time in my life. I feel like if I read this book at 13, 14, I would have loved it. I would have made my entire personality around this book. I think I probably would have read The Yellow Wallpaper around about that time, maybe a little later. I was definitely in high school. But I think that teenage me would have gotten so much more out of this book than 39-year-old me is getting from it. I do feel it needs to be acknowledged that these stories are over 100 years old, and there are some angles that are taken that are not angles that have to be taken by women today. They can be, but you get more choice. I also feel very strongly that sometimes when you're making a collection of short stories that were never together, some of these stories were never meant to be together. There are 2 stories, Their House and Mr. Peebles. I remember Peebles because I'm from a place called Peebles, and I was like, oh, even though it's a surname as well, but I quite like that. I feel my hometown got a mention. Mr. Peebles' Heart. These 2 stories were at their core the exact same story of a man feeling unhappy in his marriage, resentful towards his wife, wants to go away, live his dream. And while he's away, his wife thrives, and then he learns to love his wife again, which is very sad. Very happy for her that she's thriving. Very sad that he didn't love her. It's a ride. But those 2 stories I felt were basically the same, and it just felt a bit repetitive. Some of the themes. These stories were not meant to be read one after the other, and I think it probably enhanced my experience the fact that it did take me over a year to finish the collection. I had a nice time. I thought the writing was really good. I thought it was a very clever collection. It did really look into the whole sphere of womanhood. But I just think that maybe I'm looking at it through too modern a gaze. I didn't get as much out of this as I had hoped. I was entertained, but I think it shows that it took me so long to read it. I wasn't looking to go pick it back up. I feel that The Yellow Wallpaper is the strongest story in the collection, and it's the first one. And I really liked that it was creepy and it sort of led into like paranoia. I loved that. And there was another story that was almost paranormally, which I really enjoyed, but the rest of them, not so much. I felt the collection really started strong and then took a little nosedive for me. It was fun. I had an okay time. It's evening out as a 3-star. What can I say? I am gonna just, when I reread this author, I'm probably only going to be rereading The Yellow Wallpaper because that's the only one that I kind of loved. The rest of them I just liked. I'm going to go take some painkillers and try and get rid of my headache. And when I come back, I'm going to talk to you about 8 detectives because maybe I'll have finished it. That's the goal. I have done very little since my last update. My headache, of course, turned into a migraine because what a lucky girl I am. I did my day in the office and I went to Pilates and think that's it. But I also finished my book. I have now finished 8 detectives, and I'm going to review it in 2 separate sections because it's a strange book. We have 2 different sort of storylines going on, which I feel is just easier to talk about them separately. First of all, we have 7 short stories, murder mysteries, which I love a murder mystery. And I would say that some short stories were more enjoyed by me than others. And I would say that I definitely preferred the darker ones. There was also a short story that paid homage to And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, which is my second favourite Agatha Christie book. I really like that, but I'm totally biased because of course I would. I thought that the short stories were fun. They were choppy. They kept me guessing, but they were all missing a bit. Like, there were inconsistencies in the short stories. However, when we get to the real life section where we have Julia and Grant, she is interviewing him about the stories and she points out the inconsistencies and he's like, I'm old, I don't remember things. Which I'm going to start using that as an excuse for things. I think that's great. But when we get to the real life element of the book, that's where my enjoyment faded because I didn't really get to know Julia or Grant at all. So I was sort of left going, make me care. Why do I care about this? It was just, we would have a story. We'd have a good time with the short story. And then Julia and Grant would talk about the story. And I'm like, for why? I felt it didn't really add much. Of course, they would talk about how each story relates to maths, which was the whole concept behind Grant's writing, is that he could relate everything back mathematically. But that, at the same time, could have just been a subheading. It didn't need 20 pages of just repeating the same thing over and over. I would say that until the last 2 chapters, I was looking to give this book 4 stars. I'd had a fun time and the enjoyment I got from the short stories definitely outweighed the boredom. That sounds really mean, but it's really true, that I felt towards the sections with Julia and Grant. However, the last 2 chapters were basically all Julia and Grant, and they were quite long. One of them was a very long chapter, and the book took a twist, and I just thought, oh, for goodness sake. For goodness sake. I would have walked away if I was one of those people, and I would say that Julia's interrogation of Grant felt really out of place contextually because we're looking at this book. Grant is looking at this as a publisher is asking me questions about a book series or a collection of short stories I have written. Why is she poking into so many things? It's completely irrelevant and definitely crossing a line. And I feel like at no point did anybody call upon like social niceties or, the way that people speak to each other. It just felt like lots of boundaries were crossed and nobody said anything. Nobody went, hey, do you want to not? And I just felt like that didn't feel realistic at all. I enjoyed the twist a little. Like, I thought, oh, that's clever. But it's been done so much before. I don't know. I just feel this book was being so smart, but the book never let me decide as a reader that the book was smart, because instantly I'm told, this book's really clever. Oh, look how clever this book is. And I thought, but I should get to decide that. The book can be clever, but let me read it and go, oh, that's why. Like, let me come to that conclusion myself. show me, don't tell me. And this was a lot of telling me rather than showing me. It was a good enough time. It's just those last 40 pages ruined the book for me. I am gonna give this a 2-star, which feels really harsh, but also feels really fair. The book knows what it did. It's getting the rating it deserves. But I have another book by this author and I will read them again. I'm willing to give them a second go because there were elements of this book I really truly enjoyed, which were the short stories, the short choppy little murdery mysteries. That is what I liked. And I have now finished 2 books from my TBR veterans list, which I'm very happy about. I'm especially happy to get this book finally finished because it is not fair to have a book sitting partially read for over a year. I feel unfair. I apologise, book. You deserved better than that. I'd love to know if you've read either of these books. And now I'm going to go and do so much laundry. Thank you so much for watching.